Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I'm joined by Jerry Chen. Jerry is an entrepreneur. He's a creator. Him and his co-founder created a platform called Latte. And essentially, it's a tool that connects students with mentors at universities and institutions around the US. Brilliant idea. He created something out of the problem that he himself experienced, which is, mentorship can be better. Like, this can be a much more effective way to do this. So we talked about that. We talked about that journey and kind of their aspirations for the platform. We talked about his own kind of journey as an entrepreneur, the importance of having the right people around you, the right team, the right co-founder. I really enjoy his energy. He's brings a lot to the table. He's also fairly young, which is inspiring on its own, creating this amazing product. So we talked about that. So if you're interested around, starting a business, if you're interested in like, what does it look like when you're building a product, the ups and downs that comes with entrepreneurship, and when you're actually solving a real problem. Absolutely, this episode is for you. So check it out, connect with Jerry, check out Latte, brilliant platform. And as always, please like, subscribe, let me know what you think. It really helps with the reach. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you. Jerry, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you. You're doing amazing things. You have interests where when I was a student and a young person, I was like, I wish this platform that you've developed existed before. So we're going to get into that and the awesome things you're doing to kind of transform mentorship in the world. But talk to me a little bit more about, you're pretty young, what has inspired you to go the untraditional route and say, you know what, I'm going to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think it's two things, right? Like, firstly, if I didn't go the entrepreneur route, like I probably would have become like I don't know, like a finance bro or something. That's usually how it works in at NYU Stern, right? It's a very great kind of funnel into these IB positions and whatnot. And originally, I thought that was maybe what I wanted to do. But in reflection, I had actually started my first kind of creative agency back in Vancouver, which is where I'm from. And from there, I kind of caught the entrepreneur bug, right? So I had interned at three different startups once I came over, like for sophomore year at NYU. And then eventually I decided to quit those internships and start my own thing. The real inspiration, honestly, was the fact that I went through three different mentorship programs as a student and didn't have a great experience with any of them, right? I'd say a good part of what was broken was the fact that students like myself were just woefully unprepared. So they didn't really know how to make good use of their mentors' time and energy that they were dedicating to the program, right? And that made it so that these relationships didn't really end up manifesting and they didn't really happen. And I wanted to build something to address that particular problem that I saw, right? Because as a student, you tend to be very excited about these things, and then you get hit with reality, right? So.
Yeah. That's very cool. I love it that you interned in different startups. I think that's like the best way to get into startups because a lot of people go for like the big consultancies or like big companies. But the fact that you're like, let me actually test out the startup world. You obviously had an interest to it before. So I love it that you did that. What has been the biggest surprise, I guess, when you did, before you started your own startup, between then and now, like what's been the biggest thing you're like, interesting.
I feel like there's a lot of things, right? But I will say this, and this is like kind of, I guess, consistent with the more academic views of startups. There's this concept of like bird in hand, for the effectuation kind of method or whatever. But basically, what it is like, hey, play to your own strengths as a founder, right? I feel like for the longest time, I've been more on the creative side. Doing like kind of agency work back in Vancouver and all that. But I always felt like I was a very product focused founder, right? And on top of that, I was very people driven, right? So it's really that I found as the years have gone by, there's a bajillion different things you can be doing as a founder, but focusing on the core set of things that you personally find strength in, right? Or you personally know that you can execute extremely well will get you a lot further than I guess like trying to spend your time doing things that you otherwise might not be so good at, right? So, yeah, that among a lot of other, I guess, things, is probably what I'd point out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, I think that's a long, not a long, I don't know if it's a hard or long, but it's definitely a lesson to be learned because when you start off in your career or your businesses, you tend to think, I need to do everything, and you're better off just focusing on things that you can do really well, and you kind of have to let go of the idea of like you being able to do everything and find the right people and the right partners to actually, complement the other side of things that you might not be good at. That definitely for me was one of the bigger lessons, because there's this for me, I don't know about you, but for me it was this ego thing where like no, like I had to do, but I'm like I'm not good at that thing. Like I need to let that thing go and accept that somebody else can do it better than me. Like this whatever part of the business it might have been. So I'm more creative as you as well. And anyway, so it's interesting you had that reflection early on. I admire you for having to learn that lesson way early in your kind of career and startup life, essentially. You've mentioned that students or young people that take advantage of mentorship programs are like really unaware of what how to even be an effective mentee. So talk to me a little bit more about that problem.
Yeah, I think the core issue here is that, and this is, I guess this is not between us, since for all anyone who's listening to this podcast, but there's this general sense in our generation that we just want things to be very streamlined and easy for us, right? And sure, it's a natural thing to want, but
Are you
when we go,
referring to like a Gen Z generation? Are you a
yes, yes,
Gen Z? Okay.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
an elderly
Um,
millennial, so we're talking about Gen Zs.
Fair enough, fair enough. So you know how like people tend to complain about millennials, they tend to have like those complaints, but
Yeah.
probably amplified by quite a bit for Gen Z.
Yep.
And the reality is that yes, some of those complaints, there's a grain of truth in them, right? Like we expect that, for example, a mentorship program will just give us the right connections, and then we'll get a hand up like to an internship or a job or whatever we're looking for that summer, right? But the reality of it is that mentorship is a very ironically mentee-led experience. So you really have to know how to ask the right questions, and then ask for the right opportunities as well, right? Because you don't want to start your relationship off in a very kind of um, like transactional way,
Yeah.
and just directly ask for a job, right? You have to give the other person on the other end a reason to give you help, right? And you really
Mm-hmm.
need to spend time in building that relationship. Unfortunately, most students aren't aware of that, right? So the relationship tends to kind of get tanked from bad beginnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's kind of like what led me to this journey, and I think including a lot of like personal reflections on what I should have done better during those mentorship programs certainly has
Yeah.
helped us much as well.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit more about how your platform kind of closes these gaps. Talk to me, like, because you guys have this gamification function to it. I'm just curious. Talk to me a little bit more about your platform.
Absolutely. So, I think the gamification is a very core aspect to it, but there are three primary things that we actually focus on, right? So, we focus on preparation, matching, and empowerment, right? So, the preparation piece is to make sure that the students are on the same page as us about how mentorship should actually work, right? This is this to professionals like ourselves might seem like really basic. It's like professional etiquette things, right? Don't start off, asking for a job. Really figure out like that relationship first, right? But these are things that, especially as a student, you can be very, very anxious like going into that first meeting, right? And if you're not prepared and you don't know what to say, it's very easy for you to like lean into that transactionality and not really know where to go from there, right? So we deliver a gamified feed, almost like kind of like Duolingo-esque, to help the student engage with our core curriculum, which then prepares them for a mentor. And so it's only by doing that that they can match with mentors, right? So we have this kind of currency in the app called beans. So basically, the content gives them beans, and beans are what are then used to book to request mentorship.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I'll speak to the empowerment piece as well, right? Like after you make that match, when you're on LinkedIn, for example, I remember taking like 2 or 3 hours to write my first self intro, even though it's 2 or 3 sentences, right? We give students the right tools to help them generate that initial intro or tell them what the next step is in that conversation and when it is right to ask for a call or ask to get onto a meeting or have a coffee chat and things like that. So we really, really try to take out the points of friction in the whole kind of mentorship and outreach process. So that's what we mean by empowerment.
Mm, I like that. That's really cool. So you're using AI, I assume, for all of that stuff. So you're training your own AI.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're necessarily training our own AI. There's definitely a lot of like training stuff that we do, but it's all
Mm-hmm.
powered by things like Gemini and
Mm-hmm.
Chat, right? So it's I think living in the times that we do now, this has certainly been a big boon to us.
Yeah, there's just so many. I feel like there are going to be so many more platforms coming out, whether it's mentorship or career development or just anything out there. Because, like, I remember when we started our first business in 2019, and I'm like, if only we had AI then. So I think there's like this perfect time right now for a lot of startups, platforms to really make an impact. And I think, I mean, Latte, I mean, that's what you guys are doing, and I think it's so useful because, to your point, young people, for better or for worse, don't always understand the basic kind of professional etiquette. And frankly speaking, because like Gen Zs, a lot of the Gen Zs were, finishing school during the pandemic and so on. So like, you just didn't have the same exposure. It wasn't, many people start off their careers in a virtual world, which is very different. And you actually learn a lot of that stuff when you go into the office in person and so on. So I feel like it's not fair to judge the Gen Zs because you guys just had a very different experience compared to like the millennials. And I see this still a lot with young people. I do a lot of internship programs and kind of working with youth these days, and I can definitely see that gap. And I think it's just comes down to like, we don't know what we don't know. And I always say this because I think it allows us to be empathetic with others and say, like, some people just don't know. Like, there's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things you don't know yet. And I think it's just like we have to be empathetic to the Gen Zs and the fact that you're creating this platform to help them get better at things that they simply just don't know. Like, what should you do? I think it's brilliant. So yeah, kudos to that. Very cool. How do you see, how have you seen your own kind of mentorship experience play a role in your career? Or I'm sure it still continues to play in your startup environment as well.
Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur, it feels a little meta to say this, right? Because it's like working on a mentorship platform and then having all of these different touch points by which I'm getting mentored by wonderful people in my ecosystem, it is really, really cool, right? I mean, certainly my experience with Techstars and the NYU eLab, those were very, very mentorship heavy experiences, right? And I think by and large, so I guess like startup founders are pretty good generalists, but they're not very good specialists for the most part, right? Like there might be one or two things that a founder might be particularly good at. For myself, that could be like say UX UI, but that doesn't mean like I'm like particularly talented with fundraising or network building or whatever, right? So those are things that you would need to kind of figure out and really shadow someone who's like gone through those things before, right? And get mentored by them in order to learn and execute effectively as a founder, right? I'll give you an example actually. So during our time at Techstars, right? Not only were we mentored by the people running the program, so Keith Kamhai, who is the managing director for that program, as well as Gemma and Pia, who were from the Sound Adventures end, so they were the program partner for that for Techstars Economic Mobility. Um, Getting their advice on, for example, tracking sustainable impact or specific like impact goals for university students is really, really useful, right? Because
Mm,
even though like we clearly see mentorship as a great as a great tool for creating those impact outcomes, we weren't necessarily sure what the best ways to monitor and assess them were, right? But that is absolutely Gemma and Pia's wheelhouse, right? So it's really mentorship that helps founders like myself unlock specific expertise that we don't personally have, right? And I think on a student level, you tend to get like a more uh, you get a more like limited version of that as well, right? So like you're really tapping into your mentors, for example, knowledge base in accounting, so that you know what you're doing once you're doing your internship and
mm,
whatnot, right? So, yeah, no, it's really an extension of your your own ability, I guess.
Do you ever see AI just taking over the mentorship completely, or do you think there's always going to be that human touch where you need to actually have a mentor who is not AI? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so I think like we live in a very interesting time, right? The way that I would personally think about it is like there and in a sense we're really against the grain here. We're using AI for human to human interactions, right? When the market modality by standard right now is how do you get humans to interact more with AI? I think AI
Hmm.
can give like pretty good feedback for like things like resume reviews. But you really need that personal connection and you really need that like individual um that kind of like individual advice and assessment of one's early career and early trajectory to really find the right things to do, right, to advance your early career. I will say this, right? Like AI at the end of the day is built on human data, right? Like
Hmm.
it's all data generated by humans. So there is still like a human layer to it, but it's also the things that people actually write about on the internet, right? So you're really drawing from a pool of relatively polished opinions, right? And if you really want to get down and dirty into like strategies for how to get into a particular industry, I think you're going to need some person who's worked there for a while, right, and knows what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I'm old school in that way, but I'm just, for me, for sure, I need that human touch. I need that human other side of it. I have mentors myself, and it's important to have that feedback. And sometimes it's not pleasant, right? And I don't know if AI is like meant to give you like harsh feedback, even, like I mean, depends, I guess. But I think there's also this reassurance because I think a lot of mentorship is just feeling like a big part of it for me is just having somebody that I can just open up to, right? And that I can just share my struggles with about, whatever's happening at work or in business and so on. And I think it's just having that human, like that visual, that in-person interaction for sure is something that's still very important to me, at least. I just wonder how like the alpha generations feel about that, right? Like this is what I always like talk to my friends about, and I'm like, yeah, we like this stuff, we align with it, but what about like alpha kids and the generation that comes after them? Like how do they view, like are they going to be okay? Maybe they'll just be best friends with robots, you know what I mean? Like I mean, we won't worry about that then. By then you're going to sell your business anyway, you're going to go public and sell it or whatever you're going to do with it, so we don't have to worry about it then. But it's just it's quite interesting to kind of just imagine how things will play out as AI just gets better and better, and interesting and scary at the same time.
Absolutely. I will say this though. I think there is this human piece that creates a lot of accountability in early professionals like myself, right? And I don't really see that being replaced at any point in the future unless we get like this like crazy kind of AGI kind of model that just takes over every function of human life or whatever. But the reality is this, right? Like AI is built to serve people, and you don't tend to feel accountable to things
Mm,
that don't serve you,
very
right?
true. Yeah,
Whereas
very true.
with a mentor, the mentor's not there to serve you. You're asking the mentor for advice, right? And when a mentor asks you to do something with that advice, you have to go and do it, right? Because like you are supposed to be accountable to that relationship. They're volunteering their time to help you out, right? So I think that accountability piece, like from what
Mm,
I actually really, really huge. So
yeah.
I can personally see AI replacing
No,
that.
that's a good call out. I like that actually. That's a good call out. I'm trying to think like accountability, yeah, and like you not as accountable, I guess. Like that human piece is important there. A question. I'm sure you've had a lot of challenges as you were kind of building the platform. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've had where you're like, that like stopped you in your tracks, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think there are a few different things, right? So number one, mentorship by itself is a pretty complex ecosystem, right? You have at the very minimum three constituents. You have the mentee, the mentor, and the administrator, right? At the start, we created kind of a B2C application, right? And we launched it at my alma mater, NYU Stern, and we got like something to the effect of 250 students on board, right? But we were basically the ones who were doing the sourcing for the mentor pool, and so that wasn't like particularly scalable to us because it would just take more and more human effort to
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that the mentors were getting what they needed, right, on the platform. And also, we ran into a wall where basically we got to the Stern like kind of career center, and then we got their peer mentors from that program to double dip into the app, right? Basically, they were getting paid hourly by the Stern Career Center, and basically uh, by putting themselves on the app, they could get more meetings booked and therefore get paid more, right? So at some point, the Stern Career Center was like, "Hey, listen, you have to stop doing this, right? Because this is this is in
Yeah.
addition to the ecosystem, and we're basically subsidizing your app accidentally here." However, uh, however, we would like to talk about licensing your app if you are open to that in the future, right? So that was kind of our first sign. So that informed our first product pivot, right? Which
Mm,
meant that we had to tear down parts of the tech stack and like really revamp it. I think a core growing pain for a lot of startups, including Latte, was the fact that you do so much pivoting, right? And so much of that means that you have to kind of uh, you have to kill your babies in a way, right? You have to get rid of your uh, the way that your tech stack is currently built and like rebuild it from the ground up to serve like a new audience that you've suddenly,
yeah.
discovered could be good for your business, right? So yeah.
That's tough. That's a tough one because then you spend so much time and energy building something and then you have to like tear it down. Oh, it's a nightmare, but it's like one of those things you either pivot or you die basically as a
Exactly.
startup. It's tough. Like I feel your pain. Like I just speak and I was like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine if I have to like tear down the things that we're building so far. It's painful just to even think about it. So yeah, it's tough. I don't think people realize how tough it is to build and create and how personal it is. And as much as people say it's business, it's for you, it's personal. That's the reality. Like it's personal, it's business, but it's also very personal. I'm curious, people who are listening to this, maybe they're young entrepreneurs. What are some things that you wish you would have known?
Yeah. I think the number one thing that jumps out at me is like you really need external validation as a young entrepreneur, right? And I don't mean that as like, oh, your mom says good job, right? Or like, oh, your friend says, oh, this product is cool or whatever, right? I mean like genuine like votes of confidence into your business from say VCs or whatnot. Because I think as a young entrepreneur, you're generally fighting a bit of an uphill battle, right? If you and someone from Meta built the exact same product, uh, they would always, institution investors, for example, would always choose to back the person who used to have a role at Meta, right? Even if like technically you guys are the same and you're like let's say exactly equal in ability or whatever, right? You just don't
Yeah.
have the big brands to your name, and you don't have the proof that you're the right person who can execute on this, right? So you really need that external validation from things like Techstars or accelerators or your university's entrepreneurship program to be votes of confidence in you as a person, right? So that's one major uphill battle. And the other thing is like you might have your convictions about certain things, but don't try to reinvent the wheel, right? Like um, I think at the start, when running like say a fundraising process or whatever, just follow the playbook because you could just go out there and rediscover the playbook. Um, but there are also just a ton of digital resources, or now just ask ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
Very good standards that you should be following because it'll just save you a lot of work, and you should be focusing on the things that you're innovating on, right? You don't need to innovate, for example, on I don't know how to set up your company or whatever, right? Unless that's the specific goal of your startup. So yeah, focus on one thing at a time and don't reinvent the wheel.
That's solid advice. I like that. How important was it for you to find the right co-founder? And did you find one from the beginning? How did you guys meet? Like, how did that process go? You only have one co-founder, or is there one or
So
two?
went through a couple actually. It was kind of interesting, and today we're all on good terms and all that, right? But we had to renegotiate the cap table and stuff. Um, Today, I'll tell you the story for Jintao, how we met. So we met like a while back. For the longest time, I think we well Jintao was in Toronto, right? And I had gone to Hamilton, which is like this city that's near Toronto, um, for the summer, right? but I was just bored out of my mind because, well, Hamilton's kind of more like a suburb than a city, honestly, right? And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take the 2 hour train ride over, and I'm just gonna go to this meeting, right? This networking session, and it was there that I met Jin Tao, who was experiencing a lot of the same issues that I had with mentorship programs, but at his university, which is Queen's University in Canada, right? And we had talked for so long, and I was like, "Hey, listen, I'm just getting started on this idea that I have called Latte. We have a few team members, but I want you um, to help us with our software piece, right? Because you're like clearly very technical. And you know, Jintao, he was doing computer vision stuff before AI and computer vision even became cool, right? So I was just like, hey, look, this is a technical genius. Maybe I can ask him to help build our app, right? And at some point, we started working together. And well, not now as of today, he's our CTO, right? And we've been in this together for almost 3 years now together.
Yeah, that's very cool. Have you always had like the same values and drive and mission to what you're trying to accomplish? Like how's that experience been?
Yeah, I think the value set and the drive has always been the same, but I will say the way that we tackle the problem and we think about the problem now is very different, right? So
Mm,
at the start of Latte, we will always have this notion where it's like, hey, early career networking and early career mentorship was extremely broken. How do we build a tool that we would have really loved to use as students, right? And the way, of course, that we were approaching that was a B2C kind of a thing. And we can build like a really cool tool, but then we realized that this is not scalable in any capacity because then we have to be community managers beyond anything else,
hmm
right? Um, so today, the way that we're thinking about this is, hey, how do we get this tool into the hands of universities and their separate communities, and empower the administrators to run an effective mentorship program, right? Mentorship programs are nothing new in the world of higher ed. The reality, though, is that they're usually manually run, or you know, they're very extremely unscalable, or they're extremely slow, and administrators don't really know how to navigate them. And well, as of today, that's the way that we're tackling it, right? We're firstly empowering the administrator to then give students the tools that they otherwise need, right?
Mm,
So, yeah, I think just the first person that we talk to in each stage is now very different.
yeah. Why latte? I love the name, by the way. Well, why latte? How'd you come
Yeah,
up with
well, I
that?
mean, so I think this is an inevitable part of being a student at NYU Stern. You tend to do all of these different coffee chats for networking. It's really to just beg people for a job, right? But you tend to do it so much that the definition of coffee chatting has just kind of diluted, right? Like I don't think in the few years that I was at Stern, I've ever gone to an actual coffee chat where coffee was really involved. It was almost always just a Zoom meeting. Um, so Latte was kind of our tongue-in-cheek prod at that, and we're like, hey, well, if you can't have a coffee, at least we can have this cool digital avatar for a coffee that connects you guys, right? So that's what it
Yeah,
is.
I love it. I love it. I thought it was a very spot on. So, what are you excited about for Latte this in the coming year? Like, what is the big push for this year?
Yeah, we want to really just expand our reach as much as possible, right? And by that specifically, we mean like integrate with more campuses.
Mm,
We realize that there are like some very clear opportunities in the market today, specifically because, I think higher ed faces kind of an existential issue, right? Um, Basically, the challenge today is the fact that students don't necessarily see the ROI in their degree anymore. And because of that, a lot of universities, and that's not the Harvards and Yales of the world, right? It's universities who are below that kind of like Ivy League or top 100
hmm
that really need to justify, hey, our students come out of our degree and make the money that they spent on the degree back in X number of years, right?
hmm
And unless you have a solid platform for connecting students to opportunities, um, you're really unable to do that, right? So we realize that we can help universities justify this value, and that's why we want to be expanding so quickly. We want to expand before like these universities start shutting down, right? And as you know, there were fewer universities this year than there were before, and I don't think that trend is really going to go anywhere until like this core existential issue is addressed.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I mean, I used to work in higher education and career services in particular, and I experienced the hand as a career advisor, kind of, or just and I've ran mentorship programs and so on, and it's very hard to scale. The biggest issue people have is that you are there's the issue of just one person per like so many people, right? It's not scalable, it's not manageable, it's not personalized. It's very difficult to get people involved. So I think like having a tool that connects them, empowers them, prepares them for those conversations, I think it's a winning tool for sure. Like I said, I wish we would have had something like that because that's the value of a university is connections and networking or mentoring. It's very similar, right? Like that's how life happens. I mean, as you grow in your corporate career as well, like it's all about referrals and networks and mentorship is such a big part of that ecosystem that I'm just mind blown that universities and colleges don't maybe invest as like over the years they haven't thought about creating something like that, but they don't have to. They have you now, so it doesn't matter, I guess, anymore. But yeah, it's I think it's a needed product for sure. So I'm very excited to see how you guys, where else I'm gonna see Latte logo and which schools and universities that I might be visiting when I do kind of my speaking gigs there as well. Before I ask you my last question, where can people find you? Where can they? Maybe it's a higher education professional listening to this. Maybe it's a student or alumni. Like I want to bring this to my school, or maybe it's another entrepreneur who's like, listen, can we just grab a latte?
Hey, yeah, absolutely. Just visit our website, www.latteconnect.com. And all you have to do is schedule, I believe the buttons like schedule a demo or something like that. And that just takes you directly to my Calendly, right? And whoever you are, well, just let me know. Just let me know on the actual form, but I'd be happy to have a chat. Yeah.
Nice. I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. And actually, I lied. I have two more questions. So one question I have is if somebody walking away from this, what is like the number one thing you want them to walk away with from this conversation with? Like, what is one key takeaway you wish people walked away from this?
Hmm. I think it really depends on which people, right? Like once again, like once you do mentorship, like as a product, you tend to think about all of these different constituents. Um,
Yeah,
I'll separate it out. I'll give you like several different answers for that question. So,
go ahead.
the people at career services and alumni relations, right? The administrators that we directly work with. Um, the real question today is like, how do you go beyond things like resume reviews and event planning? Right? The nature of your job is going to change so much in the next decade because of the fact that higher education needs to change or it's not going to survive, right? And so it's really just time to think about how you're going to move the needle on creating access opportunities for both students and alumni. And that's not necessarily just through Latte, it's just more generalized in terms of like what value can you actually bring to your university's network and get more people connected more generally, right? Like, and I think your job is going to look much less like a one-to-one with students and alumni, and it's going to look a lot more like you running platforms or you running systems that get people connected, right? So that's to you guys, the administrators. To the students, I think it's really just like pushing forward with a lot of courage, right? Um, I think the hardest part of early career networking is actually just getting started. And once you've given yourself the room to fail and have those awkward conversations and maybe even screw up a few relationships at the start, then you can become a good networker and you will find a great way and a great personal angle by which you can tackle your early career and eventually like your later professional life. And then finally for mentors, I guess it's a word of thank you, right? Like I think by and large we've never had trouble sourcing mentors for the different universities that we've partnered with. And I think that really owes to your willingness to give back to people at your alma mater.
Mhm.
And that really shows like how charitable um, you are and how thankful everyone else really should be for taking the time out of your busy schedule to give back, right? So like a
Mhm.
very a very, very clear thank you on that note. But yeah, that's the way. Those are the three answers I'll give you to your one question.
Beautiful. And the last question I have for you that I ask all of my guests, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Yeah. Um, Ask why you're doing this, right? And I don't mean, and I think it's like maybe ask this question multiple times because a lot of founders will think that, oh, I'm doing this because I see this market opportunity and I think it's this big and we should be, if we do this right, we should be able to make X money out of that, right? But if you really wanted to, make money, like go into finance or something, right? Like, and certainly that was an option for me, but it's just like, um, ask another layer of why, right? Like, why do I take this path, this untraditional path? If there is like a goal beyond money, right? And it's really because, well, for me, like as an immigrant, right? Like a two-time immigrant, in fact, I feel like I really want to make sure that I make good use of the price that I paid to get to NYC, right? To get to NYU.
Mhm.
And getting a great professional network out of it is a really crucial part of that, right? And that's why I really wanted those mentorship programs that I participated in to work. And of course, when they didn't, I was very, very inspired to work on that problem and make a solution. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's personally my why.
I love it. Well, listen, congratulations on Latte and all the work you guys are doing. Really good luck with this year. I'm sure you're gonna rise and keep rising. So kudos to you. Keep us updated. I would love to have you back on. Maybe we do this in person in New York next time I'm there. I'd love that. We'll make it happen. And yeah, and I look forward to just hearing more about Latte at every university campus, hopefully.
We'll keep you posted, Elena, and thanks so much for inviting me on.